What's up guys, I'm Meredith with ExtremeTerrain.com and today we are checking out this Rough Country Classic full width rear bumper with the tire carrier fitting all 1986 through 2006 TJ and YJ Wranglers. Now if you are looking for an all-in-one solution for the rear end of your TJ or YJ to accommodate you day-to-day and off-road, this is going to be an option that you'll want to check out. Now the dual function design will be a great choice if you need both protection, utility, and a strong system to carry an oversized tire if you have upgraded and your tailgate carrier isn't doing it anymore, or you plan on upgrading and don't want to risk it. Now along with the function, it's also a great mod to toughen up the appearance of the back and won't be too heavy on the wallet when doing so. This is going to offer a lot of great utility features out of the back with the hitch, shackle mounts, and included shackles for both recovery and hitch mounted accessories. Now the included shackles will have a 4 3/4 ton rating, which is roughly 10,500 pounds, giving you some peace of mind for whatever tough situation that you may get into. Now the bumper will also be quite slim compared to other choices, allowing for good clearance and departure angles to minimize or prevent any hits on or off road. Now the big feature of this bumper though is the included swing tire carrier that is fully adjustable to accommodate the tire width and height and will accept up to a 37-inch tire. Now it's going to put all of the weight on the frame mounted bumper to eliminate any wear on your tailgate or non-accommodating components. This will be made of a 0.156-inch thick steel material, being strong enough to stand up to the weight of a 37 and any off-road encounters. Now on top, it's going to feature a black powder coat finish to protect the steel from any surface scratching, potentially exposing the metal, and any rusting over time. Now inside the spindle on the end, when this is fully put together, this will have NSK roller bearings that will allow for a smooth operation when opening and shutting the tire carrier to access the tailgate. Now on the other side, this will also have a bright and very easy to use billet aluminum handle that's going to resist corrosion over time and also help when it comes to using the tire carrier smoothly. Now this is about $650, and for a rear bumper and tire carrier, that's pretty affordable. Now while it is affordable, it's also going to have some beefiness to the carrier and a lot of adjustments compared to other entry-level choices that may be a little bit more limited. Now overall, this is going to have that dual tire carrier and rear bumper purpose, being an all-in-one package that you won't have to question, making it a great choice for your TJ or your YJ. Now install is going to be pretty easy at a 1 out of 3 wrenches on the difficulty meter, and it's probably going to take you about 2 hours or so to get the job completely done. Now speaking of the install, one of our customers here has put this on their Jeep and is going to walk you through what that process looks like step by step so you can get this onto yours at home. So that's going to wrap it up for my review. Let's go ahead and jump into the install.
So real quick, I just wanted to cover a lot of the tools you saw me use throughout this install. The 1/2-inch drill bit, assortment of socket wrenches, including that stubby wrench, 19 and 17-inch or 17 millimeter box wrench, 18 millimeter, 19 millimeter, 17 millimeter regular socket heads, and then that 18 millimeter deep socket for that longer bolt for the studs to get them set in. I used my breaker bar with a 19 millimeter deep socket. The Allen key came included. I did use a couple different extensions, a short one and a longer one, and then also that universal head to get the bearings into the bearing carrier on that swing arm. Like I said, you should use a bearing tool. I didn't have one and I wasn't going to buy one just for this job, so I did modify an extender with a round socket head I had that fit in that hole. That's also the same socket head that you're going to use to tighten that castle nut. The grease gun was just to get grease out of, to grease those bearings before I put it in. As I mentioned, the anti-seize, put those on the stud threads if you do that method of the washers to tighten it down and get it to press in, or you could take it somewhere and get pressed. The C-clamp was just to hold the tire swing arm to the table when I was hitting the bearings in place. And then also the small bearing right here, that came with another press kit that I bought to press a nutsert into the frame rail, same size bolt, so I just reused that bearing. It's not necessary, you could just use a bunch of washers, but you are going to break some, so buy a decent amount, just knowing that you're going to have to press in 3 studs. Other than that, oh, and a hammer. You're going to want to have that big hammer. You could use a rubber mallet or metal one. I was just careful with the metal. I use that to hit the bearings in, and then if you get any loose bolts you're going to want to break, it comes in handy. I'm fortunate this Jeep was taken apart about 2 years ago and restored. A lot of the bolts are fairly new, and it doesn't have a lot of rust on it. If you're from up north or somewhere that they use road salt, you're probably going to fight a lot of these bolts a lot harder than I did. So it's good to have a breaker bar or a small hammer to hit a box wrench should you have a bolt stuck. An impact would have made some of this easier. It's just not something I have. I'm fine putting it together by hand. I find I snap less bolts and strip less bolts when I do it by hand. The last piece that you'll need is that T30 socket to remove those milk jugs from the bumper. And you do have to take those milk jugs out to access those 2 bolts on the back of each side of the bumper to take it off of the frame mount. Today we're going to be installing the Rough Country Jeep YJ TJ rear bumper with tire carrier. It's going on a 2004 Jeep TJ. First steps that we're going to go for on this is taking the plastic edges off the bumpers, 2 Torx screws on the top and bottom. Also on mine, it may be different from yours because I do have a Reese hitch underneath the bumper that's supposed to work with the Rough Country tire carrier, which is why I selected it. So there will be a couple extra steps that I will point out, and if you don't have a hitch, you'll just skip those steps. I just put these on recently, so I've fixed all those issues, but just a heads up if you can't get the bolt to come out. And after those 3 are out, these just slide out like that. So now we're going to start by removing the rear bumper. It has 2 bolts here inside the C-channel. It's got 1 underneath it, and that's where mine's a little different. The hitch is covering that bolt up, but there's 1 here. So these are 18 millimeter. This one's 18 millimeter, and this one's 19 millimeter. I'm taking this one out too because I am adding a fishbone bumper truss that's going to mount in these 2 holes and mount here along with the Rough Country bumper, and it's just going to secure the back of my frame and bumper connection a little bit better. So I'm going to start taking off these 2 bolts here, then we'll move to the 2 hitch bolts and get it dropped. And I do recommend spraying PB Blaster on these bolts. They are pretty rusted on this, and I'm not sure the last time that they've been off. You could also use a box wrench here. It'll make it a little bit easier on the top bolt because the one bumper for the body sits right there, and it is a little bit hard to get a ratchet in there. However, I was able to get one in there, so I'm just going to keep using that. So this is the bolt under the bumper. It was here on my TJ, so even if you have a hitch or if you don't have a hitch, this bolt's still there and it's going to be removed. And I do recommend an extension just because your gas tank's here, and with the frame here, you don't have a lot of room to. And again, these bolts, I recommend spraying with PB Blaster before you start this project because mine were rusted pretty good on that top bumper. This hitch has only been on a couple months, so the bolts are in okay condition. They're not really rusted. After we have taken out those 2 bolts on the back side of the bumper and the one from underneath the bumper will just come off, I still have 2 of those 19mm bolts I've got to take off to get the hitch completely off, and I'll show that in the next step. There you go, the bumper's off and ready to start getting the hitch the rest of the way off. All right, so the bumper's off now. I've got this 19mm bolt left. I'm either gonna use a 19mm socket or box wrench, whatever your preference is. If you do have a hitch that's been on a while, these are probably rusted on. Definitely hit those with PB Blaster. Again, mine's fairly new and it should come off pretty easily. And so the hitch is loose on this side. I got to do it on the other side. Mine, I left the tabs on when I installed it because I knew I was going to be taking it off. Yours may just have the bolt inside the frame. If that's the case, there is a hole in the frame that's fairly small, but you should be able to get a box wrench up in there on it. Again, if you don't have a hitch, this step's not necessary. Also, if you're not putting on the brackets that I am from Fishbone to stabilize the bumper mount back here to the frame, you probably don't need to drop this bolt because the bumper will slide in to this hole here and bolt back up. But again, I'm doing a little bit extra step just to make sure everything's reinforced back here, as I am putting a 35-inch tire on the tire carrier, and I just want to make sure everything is nice and secure for when we're out riding on the trail. So again, I'm just over here on the other side. We're going to take this last one off. And I'm just gonna set the hitch here, that way we won't have to carry it as far for when we go to put it back on. All right, so I'm gonna install those Fishbone TJ rear bumper tie-in brackets. All right, so like I said, I'm just hand tightening this for now. I wanna make sure everything else lines up that I'm installing. Once everything is installed, I'll be able to tighten these down. And I think, and I'll pick the camera up off the tripod and bring you in, you can just see it's going to add a little bit of extra truss support between that weld where the bumper mount is welded to the frame itself and just give you a little bit of protection. All right, so our next step is to install these mount plates. 2 holes will go in the existing bumper mount holes. 2 holes you will have to drill with a 1/2-inch drill bit. We'll mount the 2 bolt holes first and get it secured, and then we'll drill these 2 holes and get them bolted. Rough Country claims that you don't have to drop your gas tank shroud or gas tank to get to these back 2 bolts. It does feel a little tight, so we'll just kind of have to see how that works. I really don't want to drop it because I just filled the tank up, but if we have to, we'll drop it a little bit. But yeah, we're going to go mount these 2 bolts first. We'll mount the 2 over there and then come back and drill our other 4 holes that we'll need for this. For this, you'll need 2 18mm sockets, or you could use a box wrench and a socket. It's really up to your preference. The supplied hardware, bolt washer, and then it's got a lock washer and a bolt for the backside. So we will go ahead and install those and get them on up. It is going to sag a little bit until you get it tightened. We just want to keep it level with the top of the bumper. Well, actually, it's going to be a slight lip just over the top of that bumper mount. And I'll take a couple pictures when I'm done. You'll be able to see a little bit better. And you may want to put a level on this just to see if it is level across this. Same thing when you do the other side, just to make sure when you go to put your bumper on, everything lines up all right. I left these a little bit loose I'm gonna put the other one in and then probably just put a level across the top of the two to see how it works and how level it is. Same thing on this side. We'll go ahead and get that mount plate mounted up. One thing I didn't catch at first, the edge of your bumper mount here needs to be flush with the edge of this mount to make sure when you do mount the bumper to it, everything lines up good. Again, same thing on that side, two 18mm sockets or a box wrench. Box wrench might be easier for some people back here because of the tub mount. I can fit 2 sockets in there, so I find that easier to use. Alright, I didn't tighten those super tight because I want to mark my holes, and probably before I drill these 2 holes, I'll bring the video out, or the bumper out. We'll set the bumper on, make sure everything's going to line up good. If it is, take the bumper back off, drill these holes, mount the 2 bolts. And like I said earlier, I thought I might have to drop the gas tank, but I don't. Based on where these 2 holes line up, you can get behind the frame on the top and bottom to thread the nut onto the back. For tightening that bolt, it's probably gonna have to be a socket with a small extension. Whatever I end up using, I'll make sure to point out in the camera. That way, if you attempt this, you can get the same tools and be ready to go. Got those brackets tightened down. Haven't drilled the holes or the other bolts yet. We're gonna put this bumper on, see how it sits and lines up, make any adjustments, and then we'll be able to tighten everything down and drill our mount and drill our holes. This bumper is not super heavy. You definitely could do this by yourself. An extra set of hands would be helpful. And then also, just looking real quick, I think we'll probably have enough room to install the Reese hitch back onto it. That'll probably be my last step though for this part of it. I just want to make sure everything lines up good. I can live without the hitch. However, it is nice having a class 3 hitch if I do want to tow something. I'm going to take the bumper back off and we'll go ahead and drill the bumper mount and get those 4 additional bolts in. Alright, I'm just using a standard drill and a 1/2-inch drill bit. This would probably be easier with a step bit or a corded drill with a little bit more power, but it's what I've got. Gonna go ahead and drill all these holes. I'll probably just record myself doing one just so you don't have to listen to this drill run. And then once all 4 are drilled, we'll come back and go ahead and mount into that frame mount. Alright, so I've got the holes drilled. Before I put the bolts in and finish mounting it, I am gonna hit those drills with a little bit of black primer just to protect it from rust in the future. You can see there's 2 holes for each you'll have to drill, and then with where the gas tank sits, there is enough room to access both of those holes to tighten the nut from behind. Alright, we're gonna add these bolts. The primer's now dry. I'm gonna use, again, an 18mm socket on the front and then an 18mm socket on the back. I'm gonna try it with a smaller extension, see how it works. If it doesn't work, might have to put a box wrench back there. And then all the included hardware. I think the starter bolt, probably gonna drop it in the extension, feed it back through there. And just work to get them lined up. All right, we got all the bolts installed to the bumper mount. We got it attached to that bracket bumper support. And same thing on this side. Next step is gonna be mounting the bumper. And once I get the bumper on, we're gonna see how that Reese hitch lines up with everything before we do a final tightening. So this side's a little bit tighter. You can see the gas tank kind of sits right where the back bolt holes are. The solution I've got for this is a little universal joint socket, and then the 18mm on the back, and then also a stubby wrench that fits right back in there. A box wrench might fit in the bumper. I just don't want to get it stuck because it is pretty tight. I think it's doable without dropping the gas tank, but dropping it would make this side and these two bolts a lot easier. I didn't get this because it was a hard angle to film, and with the glare it didn't show up well. The Reese hitch will go on with the fishbone tailgate bracket. The only thing is you do have to pull the bracket out a bit, so everything was loose. These were loose, these were loose. This was out completely. Lift the hitch up, slide the bolt in the hole, same on the other side, and then you've got to leave it hang because the bumper, which we're about to install, has a tab that'll slide in between there and a bolt that comes up and attaches the hitch from underneath through the bumper to the back frame. So doable, it just takes a little bit of work. There's a small gap, but it should close up and still provide some structural integrity. It's not necessary to add this bracket. Like I said, I just did it because I may tow with this. I'm gonna have a heavy bumper with a size 35 tire on it. Just wanted to make sure it was as strong as possible for the weld back up in here where the bumper mount is welded to the frame. So now the fun part, we're gonna go ahead and put this bumper on. I'll bring it around front of the camera so you can take a look at it. The tabs that stick out obviously go on the bottom. That's the part I'm referencing that goes in between the hitch and the bumper mount. So I'm gonna try and line this all up. See how it fits. Fits good. We'll go ahead and get it bolted on. So yeah, those tabs fit in there well. I'm gonna use my original hardware that came with the hitch to mount it from the bottom. And I'll go ahead and do that first. Those original bolts that came with my hitch are a 17-inch. If you're doing it with rugged terrains or rough country bumper, you're gonna use these black bolts that were supplied and they're 18mm. I'm just gonna use a 17mm socket, but again, it'd be 18mm socket if you didn't have the hitch and you were putting in the hardware that came with the kit. So we'll crawl under here and we'll go ahead and get this all tightened up. I should also note, if you're not using the hitch, it does recommend that you put spacer plates in also. Based on what I'm doing, I don't need the spacer plates just because the hitch is the same thickness as the square spacer plates. So square spacer plates, same thickness as the hitch, so it's filling up the gap that these are designed to fill. So if you're not doing the hitch, it'll go bolt. This is in between the bumper tab and the frame, and then bolt up into the frame. And I'm just making sure everything looks straight. Make sure all the holes on top are matching up. So I can get a bolt in. I think we're gonna have enough room to keep this hitch in here. We'll see though. And then the only thing you're probably going to want to finish this out, so I have a custom aftermarket exhaust that straights out the back versus the typical PJ that curves. If it's the curved one, these are a whole lot easier to mount in. Because of this new exhaust, that we'll have to use an extension to get that socket up in there and start tightening that bolt. It looks like everything's lined up good. I think this hitch is going to fit just fine, so we'll go ahead and bolt it up and see how it looks. So it looks like the aftermarket hitch, there's good clearance. Don't see any issues with the bumper not sitting right because of it. We'll go ahead and get this side tightened up, and then we'll drop the bolts in that mount from the top. All right, so we got it mounted from below, got the bumper bolts all tightened. We now have to tighten this hitch bolt and the bolt where the bracket attaches to the frame. So again, this is all extra steps. If you're not putting this bracket in and you don't have an aftermarket hitch, it's not necessary. If you do have an aftermarket hitch, they sell the tab bolts that fish up into the frame. And then that other bolt we installed earlier with the duct tape and box wrench to hold it inside the frame. And then it's got a groove pattern on the back. So once you get it started, the bolt doesn't need to be held by a wrench. It'll lock down on itself and tighten. But it is just sitting in there loose because we had to adjust that bracket a little bit for the aftermarket hitch. All right, to mount it to those brackets, we bolted to the bumper mount frame. There's a hole here and hole here, same thing on the other side. Bolt and washer goes through the top, and those are still 18 millimeters, which I kind of like about this kit. Everything is 18 millimeters, so it makes installing it pretty easy. Same thing over here, bolts there. And we'll go on the bottom, put the nut. All right, so we got the bolts from the top. Got them started on this side, because my hitch is in the way, I am gonna use an extension and one of these swivel joints to be able to access one of the bolts. The outside bolt's easy to get to. It's this inner one that just kind of blocks the back to have a straight shot into it. Those hand tightened. I don't need this swivel head for the outside bolt, so I'm gonna put this smaller extension back on, tighten up the outer one, and then once that one's tightened up, I'm going to do that in the Alright, got the bumper mounted, all bolts tightened down, all brackets tightened, hitch tightened. Next step would be putting on the tire carrier and getting all that. Alright, so we got the bumper in. We're going to install the tire carrier now. The first step to that is you've got the sleeve that it swings on. Got to install the two bearings. We've got to seat the two bearing cups in there. I don't have a bearing tool. My bearing tool is going to be this block of wood. We'll see how it works. Might have to go with a bearing tool. Before I put them in, because this doesn't have a grease fitting on it, I'm going to just lightly grease it to help it fit in, and then I'll grease the bearings before they go in. And I'm just using my standard grease out of my grease gun. And I'm not going to use a lot on these carriers because it really doesn't need it. I think it's just going to help it slide in better because that textured finish does carry inside there, so it's not smooth. It's going to have a little bit of resistance going in. I've also C-clamped it to my table just to keep it in place while I'm trying to hit this in place. Again, you're supposed to use a bearing tool. I don't have one. We're gonna try it this way and see how it goes. So I'm just gonna get it in the position it needs to be. And then take our block of wood, line it up. Alright, so we got that top bearing cup in. A block of wood will work. Piece of round metal, bearing tool, whatever you want. It fit in pretty easily once it was greased. Same thing on the bottom, a little bit bigger. We'll pre-grease it just so it slides in easily. And then we'll set the bearing and the washer and the bearing cap. And I will note this doesn't have a grease fitting on it. So now's your chance to grease everything. Obviously you can take it off and re-grease it down the road as needed, and I probably will. But I'm just gonna make sure I put a decent amount of grease on it for now. Make sure it's good to go. So on this one, it is a little bit bigger than that block of wood's gonna allow for. I just got a piece of metal that's round and fits that inner diameter, and I'm just gonna slowly work it in. Alright, we went ahead and got that in. Can pause the video and we'll get it set on the mount. Alright, so I did almost miss a step before setting it. The actual bearing itself needs grease put into that sleeve we just put in. It's got a flat washer that goes on top, and then a rubber fitting that kind of holds it all in. That'll sit on. Once it's on the spindle, we'll put the top bearing on, the top washer, and then the nut and the cotter pin hold it in place, and then finally cap the top. So I'm gonna grease this bearing, get it in, get the washer in, and get the bottom cap on to hold it all in place. So that just sits in that cup, doesn't get pressed in or anything. I'm gonna clean all this grease off my hands before I set for the rest so I don't make a mess everywhere. This flat washer goes in on top of the bearing. It just sits in there, and this cap installs on top of it all. This is just a rubber cap. Once I get it where I need it to be, I just set our clamp lid. Get this little bit of extra grease off my hands, and then we'll go ahead and get that set. Just right on. We'll bring it over here and rest. We finish the install, so same thing, we're going to grease this bearing. And get it bolted together. This is just a 36mm socket we're going to use for this. Alright, so one thing you can't see from that angle is the cotter pin sits flat in there, and then it has a set screw with an included Allen key, and it's going to screw right here into the top. And that's just going to keep anything from coming loose while you're driving. So we'll get that set screw set. And once that's set, this cap mounts right on top. So before I go on any further, got it all together. Just want to do a couple test swings. It's not hitting the bumper. It looks great. All right, so our next step is going to be installing the handle to latch the swing part to the bumper and keep it secure when driving. This will slide here into the end, and then we've got the supplied bolt. I'm just going to get the bolt in, so I want the bolt head on the front just so it looks cleaner. I want the washer on the back and the nut on the back. I'm going to use my stubby wrench just because it is a little tight, so that's just a little husky stubby wrench. and then my 17mm box wrench. I'll put the box wrench here because it can rest on it as I tighten it. Just get that nice and tight since that's what's going to hold it all together. There, we've got the handle, and of course it's loose right now. I'm going to swing this out of the way. You have to install this bracket for this to tie into, including the associated bolts and washers for it. I'm just going to set those right there. So this mounts into the 3 holes on the top of the bumper. You will have to go in through the bumper. If I was going to put this on and I looked ahead, this would have went on before I mounted the bumper. Just because of where my hitch is, I now have something right in the way where a wrench is going to fit really easily up and through this. It's a tight fit. We'll probably use our 18mm with an extension and that universal swivel head on the bottom, and then just our 18mm on the socket. I did just put one of those plates in there. I'm gonna hand tighten these, get them snug but not completely tightened. We'll close the tailgate, see how it locks in place. I definitely think these are what this is for, just in case there are some issues. You can level this bracket out and make sure it's sitting at the right height for your swing arm to be able to lock in place. So we'll go ahead and get these bolts dropped in. 3 of them. And these are the 18mm bolts. Alright, so we got the bolts snug. Ended up putting the box wrench inside the frame and put the socket on top. Just made it easier. That universal swivel head was bending too far, and I just couldn't get a good hold on the bolt. So this appears to have all lined up good. Yeah, might just put 2. There we go. Yeah, so that just bolts in. I did end up using 1 spacer, so there's 2 thin ones. It's gonna probably be hard to tell, and 2 thick ones. I used one of the thick ones, but that's probably gonna be dependent on everyone's different situation. So we'll go ahead, get this completely tightened down, and move on to the next step. All right, so our next set is we've got to set the wheel studs into the actual tire carrier. They'll set from the back to front. These don't come pressed because it is set up where you can mount it, and it's labeled TJ, JK. So 2 for the TJ, 1 down here, JK pattern. I'm still gonna look at my rim and just make sure I match it up correctly. We're gonna be using 19mm wrench, because that is what the nut is. To press it, I do have this kit that I bought for pressing other things because I don't have an actual real press. It is a bearing that slides on and spins, a washer on top, and then you tighten your bolt. It'll hit that bearing, spin, and it should just press it in. So I'm gonna walk over to the tire here now. We're just gonna make sure the bolt pattern matches up. So we remember the TJ, and I'm just gonna lay it through the wheel hole. So yeah, the TJ holes are right, 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. This is a rough country rim that I got from Extreme Terrain, and then the Patagonia Milestar 02. It doesn't match what's currently on the vehicle, but I think I'm going to upgrade to these, so I just wanted to get it for a spare, see how it holds up, and then maybe swap over them in the future. So I'm going to go back over to the workbench. We'll press those studs in, and then we'll continue on with mounting it to the carrier. All right, so like I said, I'm gonna mount everything to this before I try and tighten those studs, just so I have something to hold it while I'm tightening them in and trying to get them to set. Our first step is gonna be putting on the part that mounts it to the swing arm. It's got different levels of holes based on your tire size. Since I am doing a 35, which I think is the biggest tire they recommend for this swing arm, I am gonna mount it at the top. So top 2 holes at the top. Alright, so I got these bolts hand tightened. See, it's still loose. We're gonna go ahead and tighten those down. 18mm bolts. Heads that need 2 sockets, or a socket and a box wrench, whatever you choose. The bolts that tighten it to the actual frame are 12mm by 35mm. Washer on the front, washer on the back, and then the nut. We'll go ahead and get these tightened down. And again, all these bolts, they recommend after about 50 miles of having your spare on, you're going to want to tighten them again. So I'm going to get as snug as I can. There is no torque set included for any of these bolts on this bumper. So again, I'll probably ride back through after I've done 50 or so miles with the spare tire on, and then we'll just check everything, make sure it's still tight. I guess you could use Loctite if you wanted to on all these bolts. I have a problem with Loctite, because every time I put Loctite on something, I have to take it back off. And I did not do that on any of this because I don't feel like fighting it. Alright, so those are nice and secure. Wrench it off the back. I am going to close this now just because I think it'll make the next step easier. So the next step is our actual tire holder with the studs. Like I said, I'm installing this part first because I think it's going to be easier to use that press kit I have. It is adjustable. I'm going to slide it the whole way out to start. Get everything on it, get the spare tire on it if it looks great. So be it. If it needs to slide back, I'll slide it back. I'm just thinking with the width of the tire I have, it's going to need to be as far out as possible. But it can be adjusted. I won't put these on super tight, just snug enough that I can press those wheel studs, mount the spare tire, check clearance and everything, and then if I need to adjust it, I'll come back and adjust it. And these are 12mm by 80mm bolts. And we'll go ahead and set the set screw. It's all nice and secure now. Alright, so now we're going to press these wheel studs in. If you've never pressed one before, put it in loose. You'll want to put a bunch of anti-seize on it. That'll help from stripping it out. It's just going to allow that bolt to turn and tighten down a little bit better. The paper they send with this doesn't really cover pressing these very well. You could take it to a shop and have them press it, but they're going to do the same thing. After I press it in loosely and put that anti-seize on it, I stack a couple washers, so you will need to get a couple extra washers that fit these studs. And then as I showed in that first video, I've got that bearing that's used for pressing. It's not necessary, you can get away with just the washers, but I prefer to use it. I think it stops that bolt from seizing a little bit. And then we'll go ahead and put our lug nut on. We just hand tighten it, and you'll see the stack of washers and the bearing there. Now I did put my 19mm on a breaker bar just because I want a little bit more pressure. You probably use an impact for this too. I just like the breaker bar because I know when to back off should it feel like it's starting to strip out. And we're just going to slowly turn it. And you'll see that studs start pulling in to the back. You don't want to force it. You don't want to strip out those knurls that are back there. And you don't want to go super tight because you can strip it out and the sub will start spinning. I just get it to where it's pressed and you can no longer see it, and the head of that stud is flush against it. And I just back that bolt off. And then that stud's pressed in there. Pull off the bearing, pull off the washers. And the washers may get stuck and you may break them or damage them. So just get some cheap ones that fit on. That'll help it. And then I've got one more, so I press this one in. We just watched this one get videoed, and I'll show you this one also. So again, I'm just gonna cover that with as much anti-seize just to get those threads covered real good. This stuff does make a mess. Make sure you keep the paper towel around. And then we'll just use our finger. And like I said, you could use an impact to do these. I just like the breaker bar. I feel like you can feel if that nut starts binding up and it's going to start stripping the threads out. You don't want to press this in and strip all your threads off, and then you can't get the tire on. So again, the TJ pattern is 2-1. The JK is different, and they're labeled. But like I said, we matched them up a little bit earlier. We knew what was going where on this. For me, 3 washers and this bearing work gave me enough to get that bolt on and grab thread. So hand tighten it again. Grab our longer breaker bar with that 19mm, and then just start slowly working it. And they press in really pretty easily. You will feel some resistance, but for the most part, you're just working it real slow. Not feeling it bind or like that bolt's gonna start stripping threads, and we're just watching it. Once it gets to that back, break that bolt off. There you have it. You can see those washers got a little stuck. Just because as they press in, they'll start grabbing the back of that. A little flathead screwdriver will pop them off. I've got one stuck up here. This one's stuck a little bit worse because you can see it's a little bit tapered where that stud comes through. All right, that one's loose. We'll go ahead and get the tire mounted and see how it looks. All right, we're gonna go ahead and hang the spare tire. And I've got assistance because this thing's heavy. Down.
So that's going to wrap it up for my review and the install of this Rough Country Classic full width rear bumper with the tire carrier, fitting all 1986 through 2006 TJ and YJ Wranglers, and you can find this right here at extremeterrain.com.